Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, March 25th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about the state of the 2024 Senate elections and two individual races in which Democrats have essentially secured early victories, enough so that Democrats no longer have to worry about the future or the trajectory of these races and can ultimately devote resources to some other states. Now, the reason why I have the state of California on your screen today is because of this Senate primary that took place on Super Tuesday. It took place March 5th, 2024, in which Adam Schiff, a representative from the state of California, won with 31.6% of the vote to Steve Garvey, who is known across the state and someone who really doesn't have much electoral experience, but was the most prominent Republican on the ballot, who received 31.5% of the vote. And so in this primary, California has what we call an open primary, which means there aren't Democratic or Republican or whatever their type of parties, primaries might be. The open primary shoves everybody into one race, and the top two contenders end up making it to the general election and will face off against each other in the November race. And so what happened in California was that Adam Schiff, the Democrat, was running against many other prominent Democrats in the state of California. People like Katie Porter and Barbara Lee, who both had served and were serving in the House of Representatives. And for periods of time, the polling had indicated that California's primary was going to be a lot closer. For a long period of time, we had expected that Adam Schiff and Katie Porter, or Katie Porter and Barbara Lee, would make it to the final two and consequently cost Democrats tens of millions of dollars in a race that wasn't going to change in terms of partisan control. But Democrats dodged a bullet. They dodged a bullet with Steve Garvey winning 31.5% of the vote. Roughly 1 in 3 voters in California chose the Republican Steve Garvey, which was good for Democrats because it ensured that he would be moving on to the November election. You see, the interesting thing about this race is that had it been Adam Schiff and Katie Porter, the fundraising would have never stopped. The money poured into this race, and both of them have been amazing fundraisers, just, objectively speaking, have been amazing fundraisers for their causes, for their Senate races, and have already spent millions upon millions of dollars in this open primary that only would have been exasperated had we moved through the general election in a Democrat versus Democrat matchup. Both of these, all three of these candidates, including Barbara Lee, all three of these Democrats are in positions that had they made it to the final two together, you would have seen this nonstop spending, attacks, debates, and attention on a race that ultimately would not change partisan control, no matter how hard the Republican Party tried. This California U.S. Senate primary was one that I think Republicans and Democrats started to see exactly what the final composition would also mean for the November election. For instance, Adam Schiff and the Democratic Party received a good chunk of the vote here, already receiving the majority with the top candidates there, Barbara Lee at 10%, Katie Porter at 15%, Adam Schiff at 32%, roughly 57% of the vote, and just those top three contenders are voting for Democrats. And then when you take a look at the remainder of the races here, a lot of half percentages, fractions of percentages, yada, 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 all of these percentages all together, but the point is, the Democrats already start off strong in California, which is to be expected, but they really dodged a bullet by having a Republican end up winning this second place, in sorts, right, nomination spot, which ensures that this is a traditional Democrat versus Republican race in which Adam Schiff needs no money. Because California is so lopsided in favor of the Democratic Party, this really isn't a concern for Democrats in the least bit. If anything, it is very, very good news, and I really don't find another way that you could really, characterize this other than the fact that this is a bullet dodged. Now, the other state I want to talk about is the state of New Jersey, in which First Lady Tammy Murphy, the First Lady married to Governor Phil Murphy, he's actually leaving his term next year, she decided that she was going to run for Senate. And for a while, people thought that she would reel in major endorsements, that she was going to have a considerable chance at winning the nomination, and, she was going to be propped up by this, by the nature of her being First Lady, being well-known across the state, her name being a recognizable one. But just yesterday, she decided that she was going to drop out of the race for Bob Menendez's seat, clearing the field on the Democratic side in what was expected to be largely a very expensive Democratic primary, and what could have resulted in a fractured Democratic Party moving into the general election when the incumbent Democrat, Bob Menendez, has now said he will not run as a Democrat, but is making a decision about whether or not he runs as an independent in the general election. And so what Democrats were looking at here was that with this Democratic primary, something that was going to, come up very, very quickly. And with all these endorsements on both sides of the aisle, I mean, Andy Kim, you see, receiving plenty of endorsements, people like John Fetterman and U.S. representatives and Susan Rice, and then Tammy Murphy receiving all of the congressional delegation from the state of New Jersey with very few exceptions, receiving some ambassador endorsements, political party endorsements. I mean, you saw that there were a bunch of parties dueling over Andy Kim and Tammy Murphy, but ultimately she decided that she was not going to run. But the race here was raising millions upon millions of dollars for this election cycle. I mean, Andy Kim in the most recent quarter, you saw in total, had raised $4 million. Tammy Murphy also raising $3 million. These millions upon millions could genuinely make a difference if spent elsewhere. And when it's donated to candidates like this, they can't all of a sudden decide that their funds are going to go to Montana or Ohio, right? All of these states that really need Democratic support in the U.S. Senate. And what you're finding is that Democrats are spending their money, and we're donating their money, in races that genuinely have no consequence on the overall outcome of the election because they are already safe blue. But what Democrats needed to ensure that no money was going to be wasted, that time and effort and energy and resources was not going to be drowned down in these safe Democratic states, is by clearing the field, allowing for an easy nomination, and eventually making it to the general, where you just rely on the coattails of President Biden, or just rely on party, composition in these states, which is exactly what's going to happen in New Jersey and California. The Republicans are not going to win in these states because these are not Republican states. And so the biggest part of it that we really focused on and dove deep on was the Senate primaries. But now that California's is over, Democrats genuinely avoided a crap ton of spending, a crap ton of money spent in that race. In 2018 was the last time we saw a Democrat versus Democrat matchup here, and Dianne Feinstein wasn't really facing off against a major Democratic opponent here, but she still raised $16 million. I can't help but thinking that the money that was donated to her for $16 million could have been better spent in a state like Indiana that was lost by 6 points, or Florida that was lost by 0.12%, or Texas even that was lost by 2.6%. It is these exceptionally narrow races that really call into question, was the money spent well? Was the money useful? Was there intentionality behind the way that donors ran to the 2018 Senate race with Dianne Feinstein, the way they ran to the 2024 Senate primary with Adam Schiff and Katie Porter and Barbara Lee? I mean, these people were raising funds after funds after funds, and I look at it and say, the money that is being raised here genuinely is useless. The only thing it got was Adam Schiff, the nomination, and I'm sure for him, it was a worthwhile expense. But just considering how much we've seen in terms of fundraising already on the Democratic side for this race, $28 million for Katie Porter, $5 million for Barbara Lee, $31 million for Adam Schiff. Just think about this money that is being raised for this election. Nearly $100 million across the candidates here. That is not where you want to be as a Democratic Party that is struggling to maintain Senate control. And so had this continued, I mean this honestly, had it been Katie Porter and Adam Schiff, Democrats would have continued to waste their funds, to waste their money in this election. Because in terms of ideology, in terms of partisan control, nothing would have changed in this California Senate race besides a few policy differences between Adam Schiff and Katie Porter. And the fact is, Katie Porter spent $30 million, raised $30 million to get 15.3% of the vote. Adam Schiff spent $38 million actually, to receive 31.6% of the vote. For one, I would say, looking at how this primary has gone down, Democrats might reevaluate how they do it moving forward and might move back to a non-jungle primary system because it's wasteful and it causes all of this controversy and drama around the candidates that are in this race, around who's going to be top two. Could Democrats be potentially, locked out, or could it be two Democrats? Could there be excessive spending, excessive wastefulness in these races? And I think that's something that they need to evaluate for themselves. But at the end of the day, let that number ring in your head truly. With nearly $100 million spent in the California Senate race, I can't help but thinking, was any of this worth it? Now, time will tell. when we get to the November election and Democrats are in a position where maybe some of the races aren't going as well as they otherwise might think, that's going to call a lot of what they did here into question. Did it make sense to run for Senate? Did it make sense to fundraise these tens of millions of dollars, to spend these tens of millions of dollars in a race in a state that voted for President Biden with 64% of the vote in the last election? Genuinely speaking, you can't, rationalize this. A 30-point margin of victory and all this money spent. I'm going to stop because I think you know where I stand on this. I think you know where a lot of people stand on this. And I think many people were seeing this and flagging it and calling it out publicly, saying all of this money that's being spent, all of this fundraising, that Adam Schiff and Katie Porter were going to be these champions and crusaders against Donald Trump to fundraise these tens of millions of dollars when they could be and can be better spent in other states. We will see if this was a bad decision. Thankfully, though, for Democrats, I think what they are very relieved by, and I think that's what we saw in the immediate aftermath with California and now in New Jersey, is that there will not be much more money fundraised or spent. Adam Schiff is not stupid. He knows he's going to win this Senate race, and it's just smooth sailing from here. There's not much work that needs to be done besides preparing him to be the next U.S. Senator from California. So that's that. He knows he doesn't need to fundraise that much more. He knows he doesn't need to be this major figure. The question is, though, can this be replicated elsewhere? Can what's been happening with Tammy Murphy and what's happening with Adam Schiff and a realization that money being spent in some of these races really is not that beneficial for the Democratic Party in totality? And I look no further than races like the one in my home state of Maryland, where Angela Alsobrooks and David Trone are facing off against each other and are dueling in terms of endorsements. It feels very similar to Tammy Murphy and Andy Kim in the state of New Jersey. I'd say, Angela Alsobrooks is Andy Kim, David Trone is Tammy Murphy. And what you're seeing here is that there are a significant number of endorsements, right? Looking at the U.S. representatives list, take a look at this. I mean, you are talking about, half the Democratic House delegation. And that's because they know him. That's because they like him. But this list is endless. Angela Alsobrooks, though, receiving a lot of endorsements from notable senators, from people in Maryland, including the governor, Wes Moore of Maryland, Jamie Raskin of Maryland, the other Senator Chris Van Hollen in Maryland. What you're seeing here is a dueling primary that is raising money. David Trone spending $23 million in this race. Angela Alsobrooks only raising $5, but still, it's money spent here, $30 million in a state, I'm telling you from someone who lives here, that genuinely does not make an impact on the eventual outcome of this race or of this overall Senate election, because it's not going to go red. And all of this noise around somebody like Larry Hogan could easily be drowned out once there is a central nominee. But that isn't going to happen. They're going to fight it out. They're going to make it until May, but it's going to be wasteful. And so what I think we've seen here in California and New Jersey are these early victories for Democrats in the sense that these primaries are over and that Democrats don't need to waste their money on these states. Because in terms of fundraising targets prior to Super Tuesday, California was there for Democrats, right? Ohio and Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania have always been fundraising targets. But these very much look out of place because you're looking at it and seeing, why is California roped into this, right? Why are these states like New Jersey roped into this as fundraising targets for these prominent Democrats? The Democrats in states, for instance, like Vermont or New York even, or Massachusetts are laying low. The only time they're fundraising is often on behalf of a PAC, or they're headlining events for the Biden Victory Fund or something, along those lines, right? What you're finding is that these Democratic senators are not putting themselves out there as much. They're not fighting these races the way that you are seeing them. And I get it. Primaries are expensive. Senate elections are expensive. To make it to be the next U.S. Senator from Maryland that would ensure your reelection, every election that you wanted to run in, is going to take money. It's going to take effort, and it's going to be a very, very big lift. But I equally recognize, and I think many other Democratic senators do too, that at some point it gets excessive. At some point it becomes wasteful. And the money that could be fundraised or self-funded could be spent elsewhere or reallocated to a PAC or done in a way that ensures Democratic success across the United States instead of a more individualized basis or for a self-serving purpose. I mean, there are plenty of reasons to believe that some of these fundraising targets should have never even been targets in the first place. Now that California's off that list, and now that New Jersey's off that list, things are starting to look a lot more similar to what actually will be competitive this November. And I think that is very good news for Democrats, and I think Republicans for a while were hoping that they would reallocate funding to California and reallocate funding over the next coming months in states like New Jersey and Maryland as their primaries come about, right? I think that's what Republicans were hoping for, but Democrats did something right here. They cleared the field in New Jersey, they won in California, and there's nothing more that needs to be done between now and the general election. And so what we will see, and what I think Democrats are going to try to use now, is people like Adam Schiff to headline fundraisers for other Democrats, to raise money for other Democrats, and take advantage of this position in these safe races where maybe these incumbents aren't necessarily worried about their reelection, but can use it to focus on these fundraising targets in the states that genuinely matter the most. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.